Hello, fellow Christmas lovers and enthusiasts. You are listening to Closer to Christmas, the podcast where every episode that comes out, we all get a little bit closer to Christmas. My name is Charlie, and on this episode for February 2023, I'm asking the question, have you or your children ever asked Santa for an item that wasn't a real item, and how was the situation handled? And now that you know what this episode's about, it's time to grab your favorite hot beverage of choice, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, hello everybody. If this is your first time listening to Closer to Christmas, I want to thank you for joining us and listening in. If you are a returning listener, thanks for coming back for more. This is episode number 18. At the time of this recording, there are only 10 months left until Christmas. Before I get into this episode topic, I do want to say thank you and Merry Christmas to people that listen to this podcast throughout the world and in these locations. First, I would like to say Wazvita and Kisimusi Yankanaka to the listeners in Zimbabwe. I would also like to say Merci and Joyeux Noël to the listeners in Benin. I would also like to say Vielen Dank and Frohen Weihnachten to the listeners in Austria. And a very big gracias and Feliz Navidad to the listeners in Peru. And finally, I would like to say Děkuju, Vesele Venosa to the listeners in the Czech Republic. So if you would like to hear me butcher thank you and Merry Christmas in your language, send me a message and tell me where you're listening from, and I will go ahead and do that. I can only pull some of the analytics off of my podcast provider, so if there's listeners out there that I'm missing, go ahead and send me an email, closertochristmaspodcast@gmail.com. Tell me where you're listening, and I will make sure to get you in a future episode. And finally, this would be the part of the show where I would say thank you and read some reviews that were left over on iTunes, but as far as I can see, there haven't been any left recently, so if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts and you would like to leave a review and a little bit about what you think of the show, please go ahead and do that, and I will make sure to include that on a future episode as well. And now for the main topic of this episode, I put a question out to some of my friends in the podcast community, as well as some of the people over on Instagram and Twitter, and I asked the question, when you were a little kid, or if you have children, have any of them or you asked Santa for an item that wasn't a real item, and how was the situation handled? So for example, when I was a little kid, there were many years I asked for this item that I made up in my head clearly, but I really wanted it so bad. So I have a list that I wrote to Santa that was from 1985, and I even have it written on there. I'm trying to find it so I could post a picture of that up on my Instagram. But the item I always asked for year after year as a kid was an electronic race car set, basically like a circle or an oval race car set that you would put the cars on, like a slot car. But I wanted it, in my head, I imagined it having a ramp, and the ramp would make the car fly up over a hot dog that was being cooked. And I always imagined like smoke coming out of the hot dog for some reason. I don't know where I ever got the idea for this or why my little kid brain came up with this idea, but I always asked for the hot dog race car set. And unfortunately, Santa was never able to provide me with that. I guess somebody else wanted one and he gave it to them instead. But year after year, I asked for the hot dog jumping race car set and never came up with it. So that was my item that I had. I just thought it was a funny topic to go out and see if anyone else had some weird items like that. Now, my older son, when he was little, I do still have this item in the house, so I will take a picture of this item and I will post it up on the Instagram and Twitter, which are both at Closer to Xmas. But when he was little, he asked for a snail that would poop out Hot Wheels cars. And Santa was able to provide him with something, and I will post a picture of this up there. But what he ended up crafting was this big wooden snail that you would put a Hot Wheels car at the top of its head, and it would slide down a tunnel into its shell, and it would come out the back end of the snail. We don't know where this item came from. It was just an idea he came up with one year, but he really wanted it, and we made sure that Santa was able to deliver this item for him. It's something that he still keeps to this day, so I'm glad that he likes it and cherishes it. But yeah, he wanted a snail that would poop out Hot Wheels cars. My friend Robert from over at Behind the Bells podcast said when he was 4 or 5, he asked Santa for a trip to the moon for Christmas. Then I asked him if Santa ever replied to that request with anything, and he said no. I think Santa and my parents simply hoped that I would forget about it once I got the other nice toys. I did forget about it, but I always think of that as pure childhood innocence. And it is. Just some of the crazy ideas that a kid would come up with and just think that that would be something that they would be able to get is amazing. I love stuff like that, and that would be a great one to be able to get a trip to the moon as a kid. Then my new friend Ashley from over at the Magic of the Season podcast, she said that she always asked for a real-life My Little Pony, aka a pony. But I think it would be funny if that was something that could happen. Like, I live across the street from a monastery and they have miniature horses over there, like really tiny ones. So if you had something like that growing up, if you woke up and you just saw a miniature pony in the living room chewing on some hay, waiting for you to pop out at Christmas, that would be amazing as a little kid. Then Jerry D from over at Totally Rad Christmas said, I don't think I ever asked for anything fake. I just wanted toys. And yep, that was probably the only thing I ever asked for that was crazy, was the item I talked about before. But for the most part, it was just toys and maybe a few odds and end things here, some art supplies. Again, if I do find that Christmas letter that I wrote to Santa in 1985, which I believe the front of it said Santa Clans, because maybe I couldn't write correctly, but I will post that up. But if anyone else does have any of the Santa letters that they wrote as children, if you could post them up online and tag me in it, I would love to see them. I always like seeing stuff like that. Then CJ from over at Christmas Session said that every year he'd leave a note for Santa asking him to wake him up so that he could help him put out the gifts under the tree. The agreement was that if he did this, I'd give one of my gifts away to another child who needed it. Each year it was never acknowledged in Santa's note back, but one year I did hear a loud bang in the living room and I thought it was him. Then I heard yelling. It was just my parents having a domestic. Ah, the trauma. That was another thing my older son did. He tried to sleep in the living room the one year and wait up for Santa. And the next morning, he told us he did see Santa put some of the stuff out, but I don't know if I believe him, but he did say that he saw him, so that could just be another childhood thing. But yeah, that would be awesome if Santa was able to wake you up and have you help him put out the toys. CJ also added a tag on the end of that, and he said that his sister once asked for a phone call from Jamie Walters. He was popular in the 90s with one song called Hold On. I guess it was a real thing, but that was never happening. Scott from over at Holly Jolly X Masu said, pretty much everything they asked for as kids was in the Sears Wish Book. Sears Wish Book. I really wish I still had one of them. I remember it's probably 15 or more years. I was up at my grandmother's house the one time, and in her little cabinet that she had by the side of the couch, there was still a Sears Wish Book in there. I wish I would have kept that or held on to it, but I guess that's something I could look online and see some of the old Sears Wish Books, but I used to love flipping through them as kids. Jeff from over at the Lost Christmas podcast said that he asked for his sister not to be sick anymore, but that never worked out. And I'm definitely sorry to hear about that. That would be one of the most heartbreaking things to see as an adult, to see that be something that your kid would wish for at Christmas. And, I really wish that stuff like that didn't have to happen in the world. So I'm really sorry that you had to go through that, Jeff. And finally, my sister-in-law said that their kids asked for unicorns for Christmas, and Santa let them know that unicorns are not something that can be kept in the house. They're magical creatures who need to be able to run free, so that is not something that Santa can bring on Christmas. So that is all the responses I got for my question. So if you guys had any items that you asked for as a kid that was not a real item, or if your kids do, go ahead and email me, closertochristmaspodcast@gmail.com, and I would love to bring them up on a future episode and talk about that subject again. And before I wrap up this episode, we're going to hear a word from another podcast on the Christmas Podcast Network.
What does a poet and his friends who are Christmas geeks do when they get together? They get drunk and argue about Yuletide lit. It's time to get lit for Christmas. Join us as we open the liquor cabinet, grab a book off the shelf, and have a little boozy conversation about what warms our chestnuts and makes us holly and jolly. Find out the best screwdriver to Scrooge with. Get the recipe for Gift of the Magi mojitos. Enjoy a little peppermint patty Polar Express. Everyone's welcome at this party. It's time to do some Jingle Bell Jello shots and talk about the great, and maybe not so great, works of Christmas literature. Hurry up. The fireplace is roaring and Bing Crosby's crooning. We're 2 drinks in, and the spirits of Christmas past, present, and future are flowing. Grab a cup of cheer and find a place on the couch. It is time to get lit for Christmas.
And before I get out of here for this episode, I just want to remind you that I still am posting some art over on my art Instagram account that is at Ague Designs, AGUEDESIGNS. Now, last year I did a daily Christmas drawing for the whole year of 2022, so I did 365 Christmas drawings last year, so those are all there for you to check out if you would like to see them if you didn't follow me last year. And this year I'm doing something a little bit different because I did get a little burnt out on doing daily Christmas drawings, where this year I'm doing a monthly crochet project, and the project has to do with Christmas. Some months, if I have a little more time, I might do more than one. So so far this year, I have completed 2 projects. I did a project in January where I did a little snowman coffee mug, and the project I did for February was a Yoda ornament wearing a Santa hat. So if you would like to follow my adventures on that throughout the year of 2023, make sure you're following me over on my art Instagram account. Again, that is at Ague Designs, AGUEDESIGNS. If you have any crochet projects that are Christmas related that you would like me to try to tackle, you could always email me a link to those. You could DM me over on my Instagram account, or you could email me aguedesigns@gmail.com, or just use the Closer to Christmas podcast at gmail.com. Either of those will get to me, and I will make sure I take a look at it. So for this episode, I want to thank everybody that participated. I hope you guys are enjoying everything that you have going on. If there's something that you guys are doing to keep that Christmas feeling with you throughout the whole year, you can email me that as well. I'd like to hear what you guys are doing out there. I'm doing the Christmas crochet project throughout the year. I still am doing some other pieces of artwork. I'm doing some drawings, and along with the crochet projects, I'm also drawing the projects and posting those on the Instagram account as well. So I want to thank you for listening to this episode. Again, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts and you're able to leave a rating and a review, I would really appreciate that. I'm trying to really bump up the ratings and reviews on the podcast. That way other people that enjoy Christmas content will find it and it will get more exposure. If you don't mind and you're able to do that, please leave a rating and a review, and I really appreciate it. And thank you again for listening to this episode. And remember, the next time you hear my voice and this podcast, we will all be a little bit closer to Christmas. Thank you for listening. I would like to thank Kevin Ague for the use of his music for the intro and outro to this episode. Links to his music can be found on the show notes for this episode. If you could take a minute of your time and rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this show, it would be greatly appreciated. You could email the show at closertochristmaspodcast@gmail.com, and you could visit us online at closertochristmas.com. If you would like to have your voice heard on the show, or if you'd just like to send in a question or a comment, head over to closertochristmas.com and click on the message button. And finally, if you would like to follow our social media so you could see any pictures I might have discussed on the show, you could check us out on Twitter and Instagram, both at Closer to Xmas.
Closer to Christmas is a proud member of the Christmas Podcast Network. The Christmas Podcast Network is home to hundreds of great Christmas podcasts from all around the world.
Okay, Elfie, I'll take it from here. Make sure you visit the Christmas Podcast Network at christmaspodcasts.com.
Marker. And action.
Merry Monday, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bells.
Imagine making a child take something it doesn't want just because he bought too many of the wrong toys.
You guys give up, or you're thirsty for more?
Join us each week as we go behind the scenes of your favorite Christmas classics.
Oh, Santa's got a little trick up his sleeve.
Someone should remind her that Christmas is more than barging up and down department store aisles and pushing people out of the way.
Our weekly show explores the magic behind that Christmas magic.
Clark, that's the gift that keeps on giving the whole year.
For Christ's sakes, it's Christmas.
Join us as we explore that Christmas magic every week.